Oh, that's cute. Is that cute? Can you guys hear me? Can you see the books? Maybe I should scoot over a little bit. I feel like this is nice. We're ready. So I have two goals when making this video. Number one, finishing this before an hour because I usually take really long to record videos. Number two is my computer not overheating because it's a bum computer, we couldn't tell. So the main motivator for this video was this book I read, Educated by Dr. Tara Westover, and we are going to be calling her Doctor because this book is about her being educated. Like coming from like a rural country, not like rural country, but like the countryside, very rural, and like becoming educated from that. And she has a PhD, so we're gonna be calling her Doctor. Us, we, yes. I don't really have like a script for this video. I just wanted to talk about this book because I feel like it was like eye-opening. You know, I got a lot of perspective. So let me just like read you one of these paragraphs because I wrote really good stuff. I wrote really good stuff, guys. Oh shoot, here. Okay, this was chapter 20. At the end of the chapter, I wrote, I feel like this chapter highlights the importance of education. Okay, so basically what this chapter was, like, it was her, like, going back to her farm. I think it was a farm. It was, like her home in the rural countryside. I guess it's, like, a farm, right? And her older brother, Sean, was, like, calling her the N-word. And this was, like, after she, like, was, like, in university. And she realized, like, because in university she started, like, learning about injustice and, like, you know, civil rights movements and stuff because when she was homeschooled before university, like, nobody taught her that because, you know, who's gonna, like, check the biases in her education, right? Nobody. And, you know, now that she has gotten an education, she realizes, like, the injustices that people face. When her brother called her the N-word, like, she felt really bad this time, like, after becoming educated, because she implies that previously, like, when she was, like, younger, her, you know, that word was kind of thrown around in her household, but she never really felt anything towards it until now, when she realizes, like, the full extent of, like, what the word means and how it has been used against other people. And I wrote, I feel like this chapter highlights the importance of education, specifically an unbiased and well-rounded one. Because, like, no matter how much, like, unbiased you think you have bias. Everyone has bias. I have bias. And those things are projected. And especially in things like education, I feel like there should be, like, as less bias as possible to get the full truth. And, you know, like, even because, like, bias, I guess, is also, like, kind of like morality. You know, people are going to have bias about, like, what is right and what is wrong. And, you know, morally, there is, like, a correct and non-correct as humans. But those things also kind of change. So, you know, I guess the point is, like, trying to become as unbiased as you possibly can. Because these things, like, even with, like, things that don't affect you, you should know and you should try to, like, understand. Like, even for you, the bias is like, oh, like, I don't care. It never happened to me. It doesn't affect me. But, you know, it does affect other people. And I guess empathy, you know, really plays a role. You should care even if it doesn't directly affect you. And yeah, I was talking about, like, what was I saying? Oh, the importance of education, of being, like, unbiased in your education and having, like, well-rounded, like, not learning just, like, specific parts of history, but all of it, like, both sides. I guess in that sense, there is some sort of bias. It's not really well-rounded. We don't learn the other sides, like, in depth of, like, what they had to go through, the things that caused them to make those choices, because, like, you know, there are different sides, different ways. More than going in depth for, like, just, like, one side, I feel like it would be better to, like, go, like, kind of in depth in one side and then, like, also kind of going in depth in another side, instead of just, like, going fully in depth in this and be like, okay, so this is what this side did. Anyways, back to us. So I feel like that kind of, like, takes away from unbiased and perspective, you know? As I was saying, ignorance is bliss, but at a point it becomes selfishness. To remove yourself from conflict and be unwilling to learn about the fight other people have gone through is selfish. Being ignorant perpetuates a cycle of oblivion that is harmful. Like, the cycle is harmful. It is simultaneously pushing back progress when people refuse to acknowledge the impact and fear prejudices have on other groups that they aren't a part of. So when people, are oblivious or they choose not to learn about things that other people have gone through, that's like, first of all, like not good for the people in the present. Like if there's like a group that's like going against something another group has worked for, it not only affects the people of the current day, but also like the fight that they've had to go through in the first place to get the rights that they have now. And if you're trying to push back those rights, that affects like past and present. I heard this thing a couple of years ago where it was like, if you keep on like choosing yourself, like your own group, and you're like not willing to help out other groups because you're like, oh, it doesn't affect me. Once those groups are like eradicated, that's like a harsh word, but like once those groups like aren't able to help you anymore because their rights are taken away, who's going to help you when your rights are going to be taken away? Not like it's going to happen, but like what if it does, And it's kind of sad that like we need to think about empathy in like if these people are gone, who's going to help you, instead of like just like helping people out of your own heart because you think it's right. So, yeah. And I said that education should help one become more aware of conflicts in the past and current day, as well as where oneself fits in them. Because no matter what anyone thinks, everyone plays a role. Yeah, so that last line was kind of to Dr. Westover. She was kind of struggling with like how she fits in her education, like in her school. Nobody taught her about these injustices and inequalities people have gone through. And now, as like almost an adult in this part of the story, or part of her life, she's finally realizing the things that people have gone through, like on her own land, like in America, the things people have gone through. And she's trying to like figure out where she fits in that, because she was unaware in this. And now, like, she has to figure out, like, what role did I play? What role did, like, her ignorance play? And, like, not even just her, like, her family, too, because, again, like, her brother was calling her the N-word. Like, where does her brother play in the cycle of perpetuating racial injustice, or, like, just injustice in general? Because he's not only racist, he's abusive. And I'm assuming, like, sexist, misogynistic as well, based on how he acts. So, yeah, that was, like, interesting. I felt like that really highlighted, like, the first time where she really, like, understood, like, injustice, I guess, if that makes sense. Yeah, that was, like, kind of in the middle of the book. Okay, and I wrote something when I finished reading this book. Chapter 40, question mark? Yeah, chapter 40. It's called Educated. Let's see. Yes. Okay, and I wrote all this. Gosh, it looks like so much on camera, guys. Okay, I had to like bury my nose in a book because the writing's so small. I don't know why I wrote so small. Okay, so this is just like basically an overview of like what I thought about this whole thing in like my own perspective of education. I'm gonna try to enunciate this as much as possible. As children, we are told who we are and we can't fight it. We are the making of what our parents believe is the truth. So how come people become different from their parents as they grow older? Why do they end up with differences in thinking? The answer is simple: perspective. When introduced to others who have different beliefs, we are forced to reconsider our own. Every time we encounter a new person, we are exposed to the product of a different upbringing, and we have to evaluate their likeness to us. How tolerant we are to different types of people is directly caused by how tolerant our parents were when we brought up different ideas, including those that contradicted their truth. In a society that forces an image of one type of person, that image becomes the normal. Everyone else who deviates from this normal is an outsider, not belonging. But what happens when you're exposed to many groups of people? That, in and of itself, assumes your parents are decently tolerant of different ideas, since you wouldn't have been able to meet these people unless your parents directly or indirectly allowed you to. Directly meaning the people they let in your house, indirectly meaning a place like school. Education isn't merely about gaining knowledge, it's about finding your truth. A truth separate from your parents, a truth that can only be embodied by the things that happen to you, from the people you meet, and from the things you learned. I feel like I got kind of philosophical at the end, like education being about like your truth. I mean, I guess in a way, sure, but I feel like it's kind of more than that. Like when people ask me to describe like what education means or what knowledge means, it's kind of difficult. And like yes, like there's like a denotation of like what education is. Like there is like a definition for that. But when people are talking about like what it means to you, like what does it mean to me? Education in our society isn't just like about gaining knowledge. It's also like a way of life, I guess. Because if you are educated, you have a lot more pathways. And I guess that's like also the difference of being like educated and having an education, because having an education means you like have a degree or like some sort of substance, you know? And those types of things like help you achieve more in life, you know, you get to make your own path. But becoming educated, that's like a different thing, you know? And because of this like difference in like becoming educated versus like having an education, there's like a lot of people who are just like pseudo intellectuals, like they just do what they need to do to get the degree, but they're not like actually learning anything. They're not expanding their perspective. They're not learning it or like really empathizing with what happens in the world. They're just trying to like get the get the grade, get the degree. And that's like really saddening to me because I feel like education shouldn't only be about getting a degree and like making money and getting a job. If you're like already there getting an education, you should like try to understand, you know, try to understand, try to like apply this into your own life. And that's also something Tara or Dr. Westover like went through during this book because you know, one of her biggest struggles was money because, you know, she lived previously in a rural area. Her parents weren't making that much. So they couldn't really pay for her college. She didn't really have like a job either because she was like really young. And like she did have a job, but like it wasn't like a lot to pay for tuition. And she described like how like the strain of money took away from her like really focusing on the contents of what she was learning about. Like she was saying because she had to like focus so much on money, she couldn't like she was like getting her A's, she was getting like good grades just so she can get the scholarship. But she wasn't really paying attention. She was just doing the work and like, you know, trying to get the best grades so she can like keep going to school. But once she got her, you know, scholarship grant, she stopped really being overly concerned about money and was instead, you know, really present in her lectures and studying and stuff. And, you know, I guess this is like capitalism. And I don't know. It's like, how do you remove yourself from something that's apparent everywhere? Like, money is like literally the most powerful thing someone could have. You know, when people say like knowledge is power, so is money. And I guess knowledge is power in the sense that like no one can take it away from you. But money is the thing that can like open gates. Like more than education, I feel like money is the thing that really opens like doors. You know, people say, oh, when you get educated and you get like a college degree, like you're gonna have so many opportunities. Is it really the college degree or is it the money that you make from the job because of the college degree? Everything's like kind of intertwined, you know, capitalism. And that's like, I don't know. Yeah. Perspective is something really important. I think a lot of people lack, even to this day, even when people say like, oh, like I'm not racist, I'm not sexist. Are you sure? Because, you know, just saying like, oh, I'm not this, oh, I don't harm other people, you know, that's also going on with like ignorance and stuff. Just because you're not directly harming someone, or if something is not directly harming you, that doesn't mean you're making it better. If you're already here, like, why don't you try to make the world a better place? Even if it's like standing up for someone, or I don't know, like going to protests, or, you know, if someone like makes a comment correcting them, saying like, oh, that's like not really nice for you to say, like this is like what these people have gone through, like why would you say something like that? Those are the things that really create change, and education is kind of influences that as well, because when you're educated, a lot of like good teachers, I would say, they, tell you to not take everything that they say with like full trust, like take everything with a grain of salt, like do your own research kind of thing, because, perspective is really important. Something interesting that I also noticed in the last page, like I highlighted this line where Dr. Westover said, I call it education. Let me read you the full line. The decisions I made after that moment were not ones she would have made. They're the choices of a changed person, a new self. You could call this selfhood many things. Transformation, metamorphosis, falsity, betrayal. I call it an education. When you're educated, you not only like understand the struggles that you go through, but you also learn about the struggles other people have gone through. And, you're able to understand. And that new empathy could make you into a new person, a better person, one might say. Education can create new people because if you are not rethinking your choices when you learn something new, especially in like classes like history or like, you know, those types of like social studies classes, if you're not like rethinking your own biases, if you're not rethinking the things that you think, the things that the people around you think, your family, if you're not like trying to incorporate these parts of history into like who you are, or like not who you are, but like you're not trying to like compare how you think to like these people, you're like kind of not really making the fullest out of your education. Like I feel like education should make you rethink who you are. You should become a better person when you have these new perspectives. Yeah, that's what my review of Educated is. And, I'm going to recommend you guys some books, two books specifically. If you like the themes of this book, to summarize really quickly, it's just like family. Okay, family was a big thing. Abuse, that was also a big thing in this book. In like the latter half of the book, or like middle half, I should say, like before she went to university, but after she like had her childhood. Education is definitely a theme in this book. The book is literally called Educated. So yeah. By the way, I gave this book 3 stars because like it wasn't bad. It was really good. Okay, like I wrote a lot about like this, and it really like opened my eyes. I thought about myself when reading this book, so it was good. It was just like, I'm being really nitpicky, but I feel like the way she was able to like go to university and like get to like the best university, like she literally went to Cambridge and like Harvard, and she had like no high school education. So I don't know, like maybe like back in her day that was a thing. It's really shocking to me that she didn't talk about like privilege though. The Anthropocene reviewed this John Green, he talks about like in one of his essays, he talks about like how it would be like ignorant of him to believe that his success isn't like because of the advantages he has, like he was born with. And that's crazy to me that she didn't talk about that, because I feel like the accomplishments she had, some of it is because she's white, you know. I wish she would have talked about some of that. And like she did talk about like, civil rights, the Holocaust. Not in depth, but like how her perspective changed. But I wish she would have talked more about like the advantages she had. Yeah. And I read some reviews on this book, and I was like, maybe they're right, because they were talking about like how her like obviously becoming really educated after like no high school degree, the fact that she was able to move up so quickly was shocking, because like you can't really like have like education in division and then like all of a sudden be like getting straight A's in university after like studying for like 2 months. And that was like, yeah, like after I read that review, I was like, yeah, like I guess, yeah. I feel like she kind of left some stuff out. Obviously, that's not to undermine what she went through. Like, she went through a lot, and I'm like, yeah, she deserved her PhD. She did her best, but it didn't really like wow me. And I guess some of that was like because like I said, it wasn't really like realistic. And I know I can't say that because it's like a memoir, but I feel like she definitely left some things out, question mark. But like, who am I to say anything? You know, she has a PhD. I'm just here outside, and I can't afford like a real computer and a mic. So what can I say? What can I say? Take it with a grain of salt. Okay, this book I got at the store. You can't see the title, but it's 1,000 Splendid Suns. I don't know if this is like how the cover's supposed to be, or if I just got like a crappy version from the thrift store. But I gave this book 5 stars. I just finished it actually like last week. Yeah, but it was like really heavy. I'll say like I had to take multiple breaks from reading this because it was just like a lot. Like there was like so much tragedy. Not like tragedy, but like a lot of emotions. I felt a lot while reading this. It was very frustrating, but in a good way. If that makes sense, you know. Like I really I felt what these girls had to go through. That's very sad. Talks a lot about like how political turmoil, women, and abuse are kind of synonymous. Like if you have one, you're probably gonna have the other two. Actually, yeah, wait, that makes sense. I was thinking like, would that really work? Like if you had women, would you have political turmoil and abuse? Like, yeah, that would work. If you have political turmoil, would you have women and abuse? Which is like what this is specifically talking about. Yeah, like you would. If you had abuse, would you have political turmoil and women? Yeah. Like abuse as in like it could be like abuse of or like exploitation of like people from another country. Like if you like do something from a person, you're like you might be declaring war. You know, I don't know. But yeah, it's like in a general sense, those three things are kind of like together. If you have one, you probably have the other two. And this book is specifically talking about political turmoil because it's based in Afghanistan. The I'm pretty sure like the author isn't from there, but his parents are? Question mark? Don't put me on that. But yeah, it's just about like political turmoil and like the lives. It's like dual perspective like of these women and how certain things that happened in Afghanistan during their time or like specific times because like there was like a lot of changes in like rulers, not a lot, but like there was changes in rulers and like perspectives and you know at some point there was like a lot of freedom for women. But obviously, you know, not all women had freedom because their husbands. But in a general sense, like by law, women had more freedom, but that freedom got taken away once, like, you know, divisions happened and then, like, rulers changed. And, you know, the thing about, like, having technically, like, political freedom, like, not political, but, like, having freedom by law, but still, like, being exploited or, like, not having as much freedom as, you know, people would assume because like I feel like some people make the argument it's like oh like women have like all these like rights, you know, people forget that social expectations still exist. Like you can't change someone's perspective that easily, you know. Now education, if you have an education then maybe you can learn about things that women had to go through and expand your perspective, but a lot of people don't do that. And like I said, you know, a lot of people are ignorant. Cycle of oblivion, guys. And yeah, like people tend to forget that social expectations do exist. Like you can't say, oh, because women can do these things, that every woman has the opportunity to do those things. Because as humans, we are very social creatures. We want to fit into the society that we are born into and like we are mostly surrounded with. Like how I said before, like if you are in a society where like one thing is the norm, you're going to try to like be that normal because you don't want to be like outcast, you don't want to be like an outsider, right? And these expectations are apparent everywhere and some are like more stronger than others, so you can't say like just because women are technically able to do those things that doesn't mean that there aren't other factors preventing them from, you know, achieving their things or like their goals, you know. And it's like really sad that, you know, the way a country is doing politically determines the freedoms that women have. Not even just like women, like just minorities in general. And not even just minorities, like everyone in general. The freedoms in general are determined by, you know, things that happen in a country. And I feel like that shouldn't be a thing, you know. I feel like freedoms and conflicts between countries, or just like conflicts within a country, those things should be separate. You know, freedoms should be things that people have anyways. And yeah, like this book goes through like the two perspectives of these two, not even women, like they were girls and then they became women. They're subjected to the consequences of certain political strifes, right? Even in a political time of political freedom for women, one of the girls, she still had to be forced into marrying some guy. He was like old, like 30 plus years older than her. She was like 15. Oh my gosh, hello? That's like crazy, but yeah, like even during times of freedom, rights can still be like taken away, you know, they can be made smaller, like they can be changed. Things like law, like if they aren't enforced, what good is the law? And you know, even when things aren't like a law, people still enforce some things, societal expectations. And these women, they had to go through so much. It was crazy. Like I said, I had to take many breaks because it was a lot. It was a lot. Anyways, yeah, 5 stars. I think I already said that. 5 stars. This was a memoir, educated. But A Thousand Slanted Suns wasn't a memoir. But I think it's like safe to say that it does come from truth, you know. I feel like there are people who have gone through these things and probably still do go through these things. And it's crazy to me because, you know, things like this do happen still and have happened. And like my grandma, for example, like she was married when she was 13. And the fact that I can like count like child marriages in generations is crazy because like, but I haven't gotten married yet. Okay, that's one generation. My mom didn't get married when she was a minor, but my grandma did, you know? And the fact that we can count these things in generations show how like prevalent these issues still are. Because yeah, sure, like in developed countries, these things don't happen as much. Do they still happen? Yes, they obviously still happen. But especially in rural countries, and like I don't want to like say like, oh, like, you know, every country except for Western countries are like rural. But like, no, no, they aren't. But there, certain countries are like more lax with freedoms that minorities have, specifically women, because you know their countries, other countries besides like America or like Western countries are like more like monocultured. Like there's only like one culture, one type of person usually. So their discrepancies between freedoms are usually between men and women, and things like that still happen. I can like you can like go and watch documentaries, like people who are still alive who have gone through these things are still alive, and they can talk about their experiences. And it's just a really big issue, not like specifically child marriage, but like just freedoms and equal rights. It's still very much an important issue. People should still be doing those things. Not like doing those things, but like they should be still advocating for these things because they still impact. There's impacts everywhere. You know, if you really look at it, like conversations you have in your daily life, or like, you know, things you see online, you can see these like minor like discrepancies between how people act when, you know, like for example, if someone says one thing, if they're like part of a certain culture or a group, then it's like they get like more leeway, I guess. And I'm not saying things like slurs, like no, like obviously you shouldn't say that if you're not part of the group. But in just like a more general sense, like things that certain people can get away with versus others, men and women specifically, and like the amount of excuses people are willing to give. If you were to like make a joke about a certain group of people, would that joke be like more acceptable if you made it about a different group of people? You know, those types of things. They're very like nuanced, you know, you don't really notice it until you look out for it. Yeah. Great book. Everybody needs to read. You know what? Everyone needs to read Educated. Okay, I feel like this is a very like well-rounded book about like just education for women in general. This book, obviously, everybody needs to read it to just like understand the things that some women have to go through to become more like for the reader to become more empathetic. And this like kind of gave me a reality check. Like, not saying like I didn't know these things before, but to read it like in a book where you can't like close your eyes, because like if you're like watching a movie about or like a documentary, you can just like close your eyes, you can skip. But in a book, you have to like read it. Like you have to read it through and through to really understand. So you have to be uncomfortable sometimes to really understand because you may be uncomfortable when watching certain things or like watching about like certain injustices or civil rights movements and the things that happen to those people, but you have to understand like what those people felt compared to you and like how you're feeling. How can you live in comfort knowing that other people have to live in pain? I guess is what I'm trying to say. Okay, the third book I do not have like with me. Um, put a picture here somewhere. Betty by Tiffany McDaniel. That book also, Betty, also follows the theme of like family. And like so does this. This also, Thousand Splendid Suns also follows the theme of family. And more specifically like racism. Because okay, so Educated is more about like obviously education and like bias in education, I feel like. It's more so. Thousand Splendid Suns is about like family. Oh yeah, this is also about family. Okay. Ooh. Family and education, injustices in education, inequalities. Inequalities in education. And this is about family and, you know, political strife and like things that women have to go through in consequence of that. Right? I feel like this review about Betty is gonna be a little bit short because I read this book like 2 years ago. But yeah, Betty is about like family, racism, abuse, specifically SA, and also emotional and physical exploitation also is like apparent inherently when talking about SA. It was like I don't know if this is because like I read this when I was younger, but I feel like Betty was really heavy for me personally. That's why I only gave it 3 stars. Like it was like too much for me. I shouldn't have read it at that age. Maybe like if I read it now, I would like it better. But yeah, I feel like Betty and A Thousand Splendid Suns share a lot of similar themes. Thousand Splendid Suns feels like more well-rounded in a sense, because Betty, first of all, it was written like it's like a biography of the author's mom. And I was thinking about this yesterday, but like I noticed how the parents of Betty were not really like I didn't really understand like how. Okay, so the parents of Betty. Okay, so her dad was like Native American. I don't know what specifically. It's probably mentioned in the book. And her mom was white, and like they fell in love. They got married, and they had kids. And the crazy thing is, like the mom was so racist, like throughout the whole book. Like it's not even like racism from like other people, like outside their family. Like obviously there was, but it was mostly from the mom. And it was crazy to me because like you married someone that looks different from you, and you're gonna expect like the kids that you have are not gonna look like the other half of their DNA. So I don't know what was going on with that, and I feel like those things were kind of like left unfinished because Betty had a great relationship with her dad. Okay, like I love to see like father daughter like good relationships like in books or any type of media. It's like such a underrated like topic. I feel like there should be more of that. And the fact that Betty was going through like so much racism, like her mom was like racist to her, yet she never spoke about it with her dad, is kind of like crazy to me. But then again, like that's how like abuse is like perpetuating like the cycle. You feel like you don't have anyone to tell these things to, and so it just keeps on happening. And to try to characterize, like obviously you want to be accurate with your characters. And if these people are like real people, you can't just like make stuff up and like say things. So I guess maybe that's why that relationship between like Betty's parents were very open ended because That's like the author's great grandparents. No, that's the author's grandparents. But if you like the themes of educated, like family, most of all, and yeah, family, and you want to read books about like familial stripes, familial conflicts, also in a kind of like a heavy way. Okay, got educated. We got 1,000 Splendid Suns. That hurts. And we got Betty. So yeah. Okay, so I found like the review I left of Betty. Perhaps they can jog some of my memories, but what I said was the author really tried to write about serious topics, but to me they came out a little bit icky. The only thing that saved this book was that the writing was actually good, and there were some paragraphs / chapters that were genuinely amazing. I wish the fact that this is not a young adult. Oh my gosh. What was I talking about? Okay, basically what I was trying to say is like, this is not a young adult book, and there were a bunch of triggers, triggering things in this book, and if those were more apparent, or if I like had searched it up, I would have not read that book. And it wasn't even sad, it was just traumatizing. Oh, this was actually like last year. Hello? Read, guys, read, become educated, have more perspective. Reading does give you perspective, if you read more books, especially about like different types of books, like expand your horizon, you really gain a lot of perspective, But yeah, read books. It's good for you. Oh my gosh. Guys, I wanted to be outside. Bro. And have free will. Does it look like there's a freaking like... We're gonna change this, guys. Because I wanted to be cute. Cuteness comes at a cost. I don't know if that's like blinding. I like the flowers. Or I'm gonna change it. Crazy thing is, the sun is coming from this way, but the light radiating from the fence is like illuminating my face. It's okay, guys. We're fine. We're gonna talk about books today, obviously.